Nobody warned us about being retired together 24/7. I was walking alone through Cebu 3 weeks into our retirement after having an argument with my wife. She wasn't there. I was doing both sides of the argument in my head, and I was losing. After 17 years of marriage, and I was walking around in a foreign country rehearsing arguments with a woman I loved, something had gone sideways, and it wasn't the Philippines. So stick around, because if you're planning to retire abroad with your spouse, this is the one thing nobody warned us about. And it almost got us before the house build ever started. So let me back up a minute here. Because for most of our marriage, Josie and I lived what I'd call a successful parallel life. She was an assistant store manager for Lowe's hardware store and retail. And if you guys know retail, you know what that means. Long hours, weekends, and a phone that could ring at any moment because somebody didn't show up for their shift or there was a problem that only she could solve. And she was smart. She ran that store like a captain runs a ship. Now, I was a property manager and a project manager, and I walked to work mostly keeping a 9 to 5. And I basically ran my community the same way she ran her store. Decisively. My way. You see where this is going? I didn't. Not for 17 years. And here's the thing about two strong-minded managers living together. At work, we were both the person who made the call. The buck stopped with us 40 or 50 hours a week for over a decade. And it worked beautifully in our marriage because we almost never had to make the same call at the same time. She had her domain and I had mine. And the hours we actually spent together were the good hours. Dinner, weekends when we could get them, vacations. You know, we thought we knew each other completely. And we did. We knew each other completely part-time. You know, often when she'd come from home, she would come home from work, she would, kick back and she would unwind, and that'd be until wee hours in the morning. I'd be in bed sleeping. But then when I retired, we sat down and ran the numbers. We built a plan. The Philippines, a soft landing in Cebu for the first month, then the province, then the house build you've been watching on this channel if you've been watching. You know, when Josie and I, we looked at the plan, and when she saw it, at walking away from on-call phone calls and holiday schedules and the 17 years of somebody always needing something from her, she could only think of one thing: relief. We were excited. We'd done the hard part, we thought. The money, the visa questions, the logistics. We had spreadsheets, and we both loved a good spreadsheet. But the spreadsheets didn't have a row on it for what was about to happen. So here we are. We landed in Cebu. We checked into IT Park for our soft landing month. And for about a week, it was more like a honeymoon. New country, new food, no alarm clocks. We had made it. Then week 2 arrived. And here's the math that nobody ever does before they retire together. Because for 17 years, Josie and I spent maybe 4 or 5 waking hours a day in the same room. And we cherished those times. And suddenly, we were spending 16 hours a day. Every meal, every errand, every decision from where to eat lunch to how to organize a suitcase was now a committee of 2. And remember, this committee was made up of 2 people who spent their entire careers being the one who makes the decision. It wasn't long before we started arguing. And I want to be honest with you about the quality of those arguments, because they were not good arguments. These weren't disagreements about money or family or the future. In most cases, I generally could not tell you what most of them were about. Things like the route to a restaurant, the right way to hang laundry. One of them, I'm pretty sure, was about air conditioning. We were like two rams standing on a mountain nobody else wanted, cracking heads over it anyway. And here's the part that scared me, because in my head I wasn't laughing about any of it. I was keeping score. Every silly argument went into a file, and the file had only one folder, and the folder was labeled, "This isn't working." So here we are 3 weeks into the retirement that we had spent years planning. I caught myself wondering if we had made a terrible mistake. And not about the Philippines, guys. About us. Which brings me back to that walk. That faithful walk. I was out there alone, stewing, running the arguments back like a game film in my head. And somewhere on that sidewalk, a question stopped me cold. Now, why was I saving only the bad tape? Now, every conversation we had in the 3 weeks, or every argument that we had in the 3 weeks, I had processed through one filter, and the filter was unhappiness. I was taking it all in and sorting every single moment into evidence. But evidence of what? This was the same woman I'd built 17 years with, who stood beside me for 17 years. The same woman who ran a store full of teenagers and holiday shoppers without ever losing her grip. Nothing had changed about her. The only thing that had changed was the container we were in. We'd never been together 24 hours a day, except for when we first got married, and you know what that's like. We weren't failing at marriage. We were rookies at something brand new, and we'd mistaken rookie mistakes for a broken relationship. So standing there on that sidewalk, I tried an experiment. I took the argument about the air conditioning, the one I'd been grinding my teeth over, and I looked at it again. Here we are, two grown adults, 17 years of a good marriage, both strong-minded former managers, in a standoff over a thermostat, and I laughed out loud on the sidewalk in public. Everybody thought I was crazy, because it was funny. It had always been funny. I just hadn't been willing to see it. And that was the whole shift. And it took about 10 seconds, 2 decisions, standing on a sidewalk in Cebu. When we disagree, I'm going to look for the humor first. Because two stubborn rams cracking heads over a thermostat, it's comedy, not tragedy. And when the humor is hard to find, I'm going to reach for gratitude instead. For the 17 years, for the woman who stood beside me, for the fact that our biggest problem in life was too much time in paradise. Now, of course, I'd love to tell you we never argued again. But we're married, not sedated. But everything about how we argued changed, how I processed that in my mind. Now, when we're standing on that mountain about to crack heads, somewhere in my brain a little voice says, well, here we are again. Two strong-minded people fighting over who's in charge of nothing. And most of the time, that thought alone breaks the standoff. Half of our arguments now end with somebody not trying to smile or laugh. And when it's something that isn't funny, gratitude does the job humor can't. It's hard to stay furious at someone while you're actively remembering why you're lucky they're in the room. So, here's what I want you to take from this, especially if you're a couple planning the move we made. If you've done the spreadsheets, you've watched the videos about visas and the cost of living, maybe you've even watched some of my videos. But if you've spent your working life apart all day, understand that retirement doesn't just change where you live, it changes the dosage of each other. And no 17-year track record prepares you for going from 5 hours a day to 16 hours a day. I think it would have happened anywhere. Cebu, California, the moon. The Philippines didn't test our marriage. Retirement did. The Philippines just happened to be the room it tested it in. Now we're happier than we've ever been. Not despite that first month, because of it. So, if you're a couple that happen to go through this adjustment, do me a favor and tell me in the comments how long it took you to figure it out. Because I promise there's somebody listening to this who thinks that they're the only ones. Anyway, the house build continues in the next video, guys. And if you're new here, welcome to the evolution. See you in the next one.